piece here on my jewel loom, and I just have this side that's unfinished and I have this side where I've built up my threads, and that's the technique I'm going to show you in the first part of this video. So when you start the loom and you know you're going to use this finishing technique, you're going to want a good amount of thread on your starting needle. So when you start, make sure that you have a nice long tail, because what you're going to do is you're just going to weave back and forth and you're going to build up to about 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to show you how to do that, the first part. And so I'm coming out my thread here and it's on top. So I'm going to go underneath that first thread, over the second, under the third, over the fourth, and so on all the way down the line here. And just keep weaving your needle back and forth, up and down, until you get to the end. And now you can see a little bit on my needle there that I have threads that are up and down, so I just kind of do a little zigzag across. And now you just take your needle and pull your thread all the way through. And now just make sure it goes all the way down to your beads. And just push it down with your finger there. Now you're just going to do the same and you're going to go back. But again, your thread is coming over that last bead. So you're going to go, over that last thread. So you're going to want to go underneath to make sure to catch it and just go back and forth. I'm actually going to turn this around. I'm sorry, I'm a right-handed person, so it's going to make it a little easier for myself to go this way. But again, I hope I didn't confuse you. So you just go down and under and down and under. And you'll need to do many passes in order to build up that thread. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to do just one more, and then I'm going to go away, finish it, and then I'm going to come back. And it will take you just a little bit of time, but you'll end up seeing how it looks when I get towards the end. There we go. Just keep pulling it through. Make sure not to knot your thread. Shoot. There we go. Okay. And now just push that down, and you'll see those threads on the outside will start to come in a little bit, and that's okay. That's actually what you want. Just make sure that you're not pulling it too tight so that they're too pinched. There we go. Okay, and I'm just going to repeat and go backwards. And I'm just going up and down. Make sure not to make sure not to shred any of your threads by going through them. So you got to be really careful. Go, and just go back. So I'm going to finish doing this, and then I'll be back to show you the next step. So as you can see, I've built up this second side here. And I'm going to come around and I'm going to do one more row, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to add little knots just to help tie off this thread. So same as before, I'm just going to go under that first one, over the second, and so forth, and I'm going to get maybe to about that fourth one there. And I'm going to pull my needle through. And what I want to do now is I'm going to go back underneath that same thread, and I'm just going to kind of make a little sort of loop, really. I guess it's less of a knot and more of just a little loop, just to try to tie off some of that thread there. So now I'm just going to continue, and I'm going to do a few more. There we go. And now I'm going to tie a knot right in the center there. And this is very similar to tying off any other thread that you might have been doing in bead weaving. Just going to go through that little loop and bring that knot down to the center. And just sort of continue. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the other side and I'm going to go back and weave back towards the center. So I went all the way to the outside there. And just bring your threads down. And now just come back. And I'm going to go over that last one there. There we go. And now I'm going to go around that thread again. Come back up, go through the loop, and make a little knot. There we go. And now because this is my final knot, I'm just going to do that on the same strand just one more time. Just real quick. And just go through that knot. All right, so that should be nice and secure, and I have a nice big thread built up there. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to take my snips, and I'm just going to snip close to that tail right there. So the next part is we are going to sort of seal these threads, and we're going to be using super glue glue. Now this glue is really great because it's incredibly wet in terms of a glue. You're going to see in just a second. So you just need a few drops. So what I recommend, actually I'm going to take just a little post-it note or a little scrap of paper and just hold it underneath so you can kind of see. And then you'll see how sort of wet this is. And now you don't need too much. So you just kind of want to use the tip of the glue bottle and sort of spread it along. And what you really want to focusing on is the tops there, making sure that's nice and sealed. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of flip over my work here. And I know this might be hard to see, but you're going to do the exact same thing on the back. Just add a couple drops of glue, even less on the back because it'll kind of go through. But you just really want to make sure that you have a nice seal on those threads. Just like so. So you can see how it's really just sort of wet on those threads. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to set this aside and let this dry, and I definitely recommend that you let it dry overnight. So while this is drying, I'm going to show you the next part so we can help get prepared. Okay, so I've already gone ahead and made one of my little ends here, and this is just using a little piece of the Create Recklessly faux leather, and I have here the Ultra Suede microfiber. So this is just sort of the one edge of the tail that we're going to be making. So I'm going to show you how to make this. So what I've done, let me show you on my piece here. The way I measured how long I needed this to be is I measured how long I wanted it to sort of cover. Now, because you see that the hole for the Ultra Suede is about, I would say about 2/3 of the way back, I just wanted to make sure that it was going to cover that. See how that sort of fits? And then I wanted just a little bit on each side because I need to make sure that those ends are going to be glued down. So when you do this type of finishing technique, you're going to want it to be a little bit wider, and you're going to want to make sure that there's enough room for your threads to be before you make that little slit for your Ultra Suede. So let me set that aside. So for this particular piece, I made a square that's about 1.25 inches by a little bit over 1.25 inches actually. So this is my little piece here, and you can see it's actually very easy to cut on the back. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to fold it, and I'm going to fold it again. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a little slit in the top there, and I suggest using snips for this so that you can snip a little bit at a time, and you're just going to snip just a little bit. There we go. Just enough. And then open it up and flip it back the other way because you're going to want it to, the snip to go all the way through, and you can see it went through just a little bit. I'm just going to widen that just a little go. So now I have my slit for my ultra suede. So for this particular bracelet, I'm going to be using about 12 inches of ultra suede. And you can either use your snips again, or you can just use regular scissors just to cut that. I'm going to go ahead and set that aside. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through and just make a lark's head knot. So what needs to happen is two ends need to go through the little slit that you cut. And sometimes, because you don't want the slit to be too much, I'm just going to go through one at a time and just sort of pull that up through and down through that other side. If you need to make your slits a little bit bigger, you can at this time. So now I'm going to take that second piece and sort of squeeze it through. There you go. And through that second one. There it is. Okay. So when you fold it over, you'll have your two ends coming out one side and a loop on the other side. So very simply, all you need to do is take your two ends and go through your lark's head. And I'm going to even it out by pulling on one of those strands because I want my two ends to be even. But now that they're even, I can just pull. And now I have that nice little lark's head knot. So we are all set with our two pieces. So all we need to do now is let our loom piece dry, and then I will show you how to officially attach these and get your loom piece off of your loom. So for the next part, I have my glue nice and dried, so my ends are really stiff. And now it's time to take it off of our loom. So you can either use scissors or your snips. And what you're going to want to do is cut close to where that glue is, because it should be all nice and stiff by now. So that's nice and stiff, and that's not going anywhere. So I'm just going to flip it around and do that on the other side. Of course, you can see it's already sort of coming off, so you might just have to pull it a little taut. And there we go. So I'm just going to remove my loom from my work surface here and show you the piece that I'm left with. So here you go. So now it's all nice and stiff, and those beads aren't going anywhere, and that's exactly what you want. So now what we're going to do is we're going to attach our ends. And one thing I just want to let you know before you do this is to make sure that your knots are facing the same way so that when you put it on, you have that nice seamless look. So I'm going to do one side in the video here. And we're going to be using a different glue to attach this because we don't want that stiff thing that the Super New Glue gave us. So this is why we use the Super New Glue for this. And now we're going to use E6000 for this next portion. Okay, so I'm just going to put a little bit on my work surface. And I like to just use like a Post-it note, or if you're using wax paper or something, you can do that as well. So all I'm going to do now is I'm going to kind of open up that duck bill that I've got there, use a toothpick, get a nice size of the glue on there. You don't want to use too much, you also don't want to use too little, and just kind of make sure that it's nice and coated in there, because you're going to want that nice thick layer of glue. But of course, that happy medium of not too much where it's squeezing out, just a little bit on each side, because don't forget this is fabric, so it's going to absorb a little bit of that glue, so you can kind of feel free to use a little bit extra. And I'm just kind of using my toothpick to just sort of get in there in all those little spaces, just to make sure that it's going to glue up nice and seamlessly for myself. Okay, just a little bit more across the top there. Okay, so that is a good amount of glue in there that I've got going on. So again, I just want to make sure my knot's facing the right way. And all you're going to do is sort of place it into your loom work, center it, and then I'm going to place mine down on my work surface here so that I can just nicely press it down together. And just kind of work it around, make sure you're getting all that glue nice and happy. And also make sure that those beads come right up to that edge there. You can check it on the back as well. And now what I'm going to do, because you have to let this dry for a little while, I'm going to use my ruler actually, and I'm going to place my ruler down, and I'm going to place a heavy object on top of that, just so that you get that nice, smooth seal across the top. So all I'm going to do now is I'm going to do the second side, and when I come back, I'm going to show you how you can tie this onto your wrist and how easily it looks. So I'll be right back to show you that after I've done the second side. So I've let my piece dry for about 24 hours, which is what I recommend before wearing it because you are going to be tugging on these ends here. So I do want to show you just a little bit of sizing help for you. So when you're doing this, your ends are going to be a little over about ½ inch. So you do want to make sure that your bead weaving is actually not that long. For example, my bead weaving here is about 4 inches, but when I add it to my clasp, I'm looking at almost 6 inches. And then when you tie it around your wrist, I'll just show you sort of on mine, I have about a 6½ inch wrist. So you're going to see that you're going to want, enough room to do just a nice little fun knot. And you can always trim these ends if you find that they're too long for you. You can also tie little knots in the end if you want to add a little bit more security. I do recommend that you can tie all 4 in just a very simple double overhand knot and just tie that again to wear if you like. Or another suggestion is that you can take one side and tie your knot and then take the other side and tie your knot, just kind of depending on how you'd like to wear that and how you're more comfortable. So there are just a couple little ways to finish it off. And you can also, of course, use different cord and you can attach clasps. There's a lot of fun stuff to do with this. But the method that I really wanted to showcase in this video is how to add those little faux leather pieces to the end. I hope you enjoyed this video. You can find all of these supplies and more videos